It's been over 10 months since season 1 ended. Peter's in Bangkok, Thailand, getting some pre-mission training. Peter's partner on this mission was a woman named Anna. They were a two-person intel team. Their target, Warren. Then Warren met up with a bald dude, but they couldn't tell if any exchange went down. Neither Anna nor Peter had a clue who this guy was. At this point, the surveillance got a whole lot tougher. This tale lasted all day, right into the night. Peter made a mistake and got spotted. You know how intel guys can usually sense each other? Well, right then, two more guys popped out of nowhere, cutting them off and surrounding them. They pulled their guns and started blasting right away. Peter fought back hard, outgunned and in a bad spot. On Anna's side, she was compromised too, ambushed by another group of shooters. Sure enough, they got ambushed again on the next leg of their route to the extraction point. Anna got shot dead by the bald guy. Peter called it in and requested immediate contact with HQ. A black female agent named Catherine answered the call. Now the story shifts to Rose. She's working at an IT company. Their company has the super cutting-edge big data app, but Rose keeps getting interrupted by these mysterious, unidentified calls. The guy on the phone tells her that Peter's in trouble. Rose then cashes in a favor, you know, from back in season 1 when she helped the president, to get a meeting with Catherine. Back at the office, she basically turns the big data app into a tracking tool. Using a still image from a video search in the corner of the screen, she manages to find a clue related to Peter's situation. Rose immediately asks her boss for time off, saying she can work remotely, and they approve it. The camera then cuts to Peter, who's watching a family. Turns out the kid's dad is Warren. Peter stole the kid's phone and used a messaging app to try and lure Warren out into the open. Meanwhile, Rose is tracking the clues from the emergency room and manages to find the kid. When she realizes Peter stole the kid's phone, after going through so much trouble to lure Warren, Peter takes off, but ends up running into Rose. That's where episode 1 ends. So, we pick up the story in episode 2. It starts with a flashback from 9 months ago. Peter had just finished training in Sector 3 and was being assigned to Sector 2. Then, Catherine gives Peter a secret mission, investigate a mole within the CIA's Bangkok branch. But he can't let the CIA know he's doing it. So, Catherine assigns him to Anna for training before he starts the actual mission. Catherine acts like she hates Peter, but that's not really how she feels. We can tell from their conversations that Anna is someone Catherine personally recruited, a real right-hand woman. This whole CIA mole situation in Bangkok is a huge case, and Catherine giving it to Peter and having Anna oversee the mission is her way of showing Peter she's being fair. Fast forward 9 months, and Peter and Rose are being chased by this bald dude and his crew. After everything that went down in the first season, Adam's guys are weak. So with Rose's help, Peter takes down one assassin and they easily escape the alley and hop in a rideshare taxi. The driver was saying ride-sharing apps don't work like that, but Rose immediately pulled out some cash, and he shut right up. After they made it to Peter's safe house, after being apart for almost 10 months, their reunion was polite and reserved. Peter thoughtfully gave Rose the bedroom because he knew she'd be safer behind a closed door. Then the scene cuts to the embassy, but this whole storyline with them is actually Finn's misdirection. This guy looks like the main villain, but he's really just a mini-boss. Inside the embassy, the ambassador is briefing the staff. The assistant ambassador, Noor, who wears a headscarf, is walking around serving tea. She brings tea to the best-looking guy in the embassy, who turns out to be the head of security, Javed. She deliberately turns the handle of the teacup towards Javed. Considering what happens later, I think this might be Noor's way of showing goodwill to the new security chief, Javed. Or, it could just be how she shows respect to men from her culture. The ambassador's speech was mostly security reminders and work stuff. After all, they're a diplomatic mission from another country sitting right on top of the lighthouse. Basically, they're in enemy territory. Noor seems super diligent. She's going the extra mile cleaning the ambassador's office. Another female assistant, Hala, tells her not to overdo it while also gossiping a little. She says Javed has his eye on Noor, and that Noor's the only single woman on the diplomatic team. She thinks Noor and Javed would make a great match. Meanwhile, Rose and Peter start tracking down Warren. Rose is dissing the facial recognition software while also laying out her findings. She figured out that Warren was back in the city. Then, the two of them notice that the Ethan kid's family is out at some kind of competition. Peter was gonna go it alone, but Rose talked him out of it, so they both went. After all, throughout part 1, Rose was never a liability and always had Peter's back. Once they were in the car, Rose noticed some suspicious gear inside. Not wanting to mess with Peter's focus, she doesn't say anything about it. Meanwhile, Warren bursts into Ethan's locker room, trying to grab the kid. By the time Peter and Rose get there, Warren and Ethan are gone. Peter asks Ethan's mom if Warren ever mentioned any safe houses back when they were married. That gives Peter and Rose a lead to follow. Elsewhere, Noor left the laundromat, but she didn't head back to the embassy. At a fruit stand, she locked eyes with a man, Adonis. She then quickly ducked into a safe house. Turns out, Noor had been working as a CIA spy, constantly leaking info about the diplomatic team. This time, the intel was about a drone, but Adonis brushed it off, saying the news was old. The two of them started arguing. That's when Noor dropped a rumor she'd heard: the ambassador had been in contact with an intelligence operative from Night Action. Adonis said they needed proof before acting on it. Adonis acted dismissive of Noor, but the second he got back, he reported everything to his superiors. Meanwhile, Noor, all excited, snuck back into the embassy and went into the ambassador's office looking for intel, but Javed caught her. But the more beautiful, the better women were at lying. Meanwhile, Warren was leading Ethan to a small airfield, getting ready to jump on a plane and get out of there. Rose and Peter showed up just in time. After a struggle, Peter finally managed to subdue Warren and stuff him in the car. So Warren's now captured. Rose decided to leave. Before she left, she said goodbye to Peter and told him to always remember his ideals. Then she set off to leave New York via the path Peter suggested, but she had no idea she was already being followed. Her followers were Adam's goons, and another one was Catherine. Turns out, Catherine also got a lead from Ethan and was tailing Rose. Peter used Warren's love for his son, telling him there was still a chance to redeem himself in Ethan's eyes and not be seen as a complete traitor. Warren wavered and finally decided to confess. He told Peter about the information he sold in Bangkok last time. It was an old CIA project. When Peter asked for the project name and details, Warren mentioned the name Foxglove. Just then, a sniper shot him dead. Peter immediately took cover. However, the sniper didn't attack further. Let's watch episode 3 together. The story returns to the present. Turns out, the caller was Adam. He's using Rose's life as leverage, forcing Peter to surrender and reveal what he learned from Warren. But Peter definitely won't comply. He'll never go along with that. He used a light as a distraction and snatched the recording device. At the same time, he called Rose and told her to run. Rose didn't say a word, she just ran. Peter fought and retreated at the same time. Compared to Peter's agility, Rose was in a much more dangerous situation. But it was alright. With Peter's guidance, she cleverly escaped. She even managed to grab a small knife and stab the bald guy. Then she ran off but was pulled into the shadows by a mysterious person. Turns out, it was Catherine, who had been following her. Perhaps sensing Catherine's good intentions, Rose revealed the meeting location. When the three reunited, Peter completely ignored his superior and immediately checked on Rose. After Rose urged him, Peter started to talk with Catherine. Back home safe, Rose had a PTSD episode. Peter immediately embraced her and they were finally able to sleep. Afterward, they started investigating the bald guy. There was no current information on him in the CIA or FBI systems. Meanwhile, Noor, a natural-born spy, went to an electronics store and bought a tracking device. After the ambassador left, Noor used a tracking app to follow him. When Noor saw the ambassador and Javed enter a building, she sat in a cafe across the street to watch. A short while later, a bald man entered the building. Noor quickly snapped a picture. The scene shifted to Tomash, the son of a warlord. He was trying to rally diplomatic support for his warlord father who was imprisoned in The Hague. Just then, Sloan returned from shopping. Elsewhere, the IT expert, Rose, found information on the bald guy. He was a deceased former Marine named Solomon. Meanwhile, Noor was watching and saw the bald man exit. She immediately took a picture. The ambassador and Javed also exited the building. And the suitcase that was previously in Solomon's possession was now being carried by the ambassador. The ambassador and Javed returned to the embassy and casually placed his coat on Hala's desk. Noor immediately went and grabbed the coat. When she took it to the code room, she secretly retrieved the tracking device she had planted earlier. Meanwhile, Rose and Peter went to the home of Celeste, Solomon's sister. Rose quickly created a fake identity for herself. She said her father was also a Marine and had been Solomon's commanding officer for a time. They were welcomed inside. Celeste had lost both her legs in a car accident. The scene shifted to a military base, where the Night Action Force was transporting chemical materials along with a mobile lab. As expected, disaster struck, the convoy was attacked, and the materials and mobile lab were stolen. Back with Catherine, the three were still talking. Catherine was mainly playing matchmaker for Rose. She kept hinting to Peter that Rose felt safer with him around. Furthermore, Rose's skills were very useful. Rose also said her work situation could be figured out later. Finally, Peter verbally refused, but his body language said otherwise. He still accepted Rose's offer. He looked pretty happy about it. Then, Catherine received a phone call. A CIA source reported that Solomon had surfaced and had dealings with a UN ambassador. Next, we see the night action team officially bringing Noor on board. When Tomasz received a voicemail, the sender was Marcus. Finally, this season's main villain has been fully revealed. Episode 3 ends, and we continue the story in Episode 4. It begins with a flashback to a year earlier, delving into Noor's past. Her friend was a radical freelance journalist. Noor was worried that her friend's extreme actions would anger those in power. Noor said that she would be working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and would make contributions in the future. Her friend told her to wake up and think about her brother. He would be conscripted into the military next year, and it was forced. Just then, government goons burst in. The friend told Noor to run, while she was arrested. But at least it gives us a better understanding of why Noor wants to leave her country. Noor walked down the street and took off her headscarf again. When she entered the safe house, she was startled because this time it wasn't Adonis who appeared, but Rose and Peter. "We're your new handlers. The most important thing right now is, what's inside that bag?" Noor said the bag was locked in the ambassador's study. Peter said, "If you can get the information inside, I'll guarantee your family's safe passage here. If you can't, we go our separate ways, each person for themselves." Noor said that her brother would be conscripted next week, and then he'd be sent to the battlefield as cannon fodder. So, she had to get her family out before that. "Look, I'm seriously swamped. This entire week is dedicated to prepping for the UN conference. Tomorrow, there's this fancy reception at the ambassador's residence, and then 3 days after that, I'm heading to the Water Resources Conference. I am just completely booked solid." But what about Peter? Instead of dumping all the pressure on Noor, he came up with a different angle, using that party to their advantage. After Noor gave him the lowdown on the ambassador's place, they put together a pretty straightforward plan. Break into the embassy, grab the ambassador's access card, use the service stairs and study, dig up the intel they need, and get out without anyone noticing a thing. Noor also warned Peter that the head of security, Javed, is a tough guy, so he'd have to be extra careful. But she could help with getting that access card from the ambassador, as long as someone could create a distraction. Rose jumps right in and says, "That's me. I'll do it." So, the break-in plan was officially set. Meanwhile, Catherine went to her sister Solomon's place, Celeste's house, but it was totally empty. Nobody was there. The neighbor told her that she just packed up and left overnight. On the other side of things, Tomasz and Marcus are starting to clash too. It's a power struggle, a personality conflict, and just how they operate. While they're arguing, Solomon shows up and hangs out nearby. When he leaves, he slips Marcus a red USB drive. There's definitely something going on between those two. Then, the scene switches to inside the embassy. Noor's looking for Hala again. Hala's prying into Noor's love life, but Noor tells her to go relax. While Hala's away, Noor steps in to take over the party logistics. Technically, it's Hala's job, but Noor secretly added a former Swiss Interior Ministry official to the guest list. It's morning now, and the couple is still strategizing about how to get intel inside the embassy. Peter says he can jam the surveillance for 15 minutes, enough time to break into the ambassador's study, but only if Noor can get a hold of the access card. Rose promises she'll make sure Noor gets that card. Then, Peter introduced Rose to her partner for this mission. It was the guy Noor had set up, a Swiss dude on the guest list. Back at the embassy, Noor finished getting ready, putting on a blue headscarf. Totally coincidental, Rose was also wearing a green suit. Before they left, Peter reminded Rose to prioritize her safety above all else. The two of them walked into the embassy. No one was allowed to bring any communication devices to this party. As soon as Rose got to the party, she spotted their target. "Hold your horses, gotta mingle first, then make a move." Meanwhile, Peter took advantage of a lapse in security and started messing with the equipment, starting a 15-minute countdown. Noor noticed the security monitors were down and immediately started her part of the plan. Then, Rose put on her acting chops. She pretended to choke on some food like she couldn't breathe. Noor used this as a chance to get close to the ambassador and snatch the room key card. But as Noor was about to hand the card to Peter, Javed appeared and asked Peter to take a call. Peter had no choice, and Noor had to pass off the phone and keycard to Rose, who had to enter the ambassador's room and obtain the files. The real reason, Javed was onto Peter. The way he walked, the look in his eyes when he entered the room, it all screamed that he was some kind of Jack Bauer. The bottom line is that Peter's in deep trouble. This is embassy territory, which means technically, it's like Syrian soil. And Peter just got caught here, looking like a total spy. Rose, on the other hand, is way more on the ball. She manages to grab the briefcase successfully, But inside, it turns out there are just some DGSE documents. The DGSE is like the French CIA. Noor's team is trying to rescue trapped Peter. She purposely spills a drink on this Swiss guy. Javed smooths things over with the guy quickly. Rose grabs the documents and gets out of the room. The cameras aren't working yet, but she runs into Halette. She pretends she's looking for a less crowded bathroom upstairs and says she found the phone she's holding. She actually pulls it off. But 15 minutes fly by. This whole thing was caught on camera after all. Meanwhile, Peter is being escorted downstairs. He quietly takes out 2 guards and escapes. Rose quickly gives the Swiss guy his access card back. He gives her a European-style hug and returns the card to the ambassador. Peter anxiously asks her how the mission went. Rose tells him everything that happened. Peter explodes, but not because the info is still on Noor's phone. He's furious that Rose went rogue and put herself in danger. Rose didn't say a word, she just hugged and kissed Peter. Then, at the end of episode 4, the story jumps to the safe house. Before Noor showed up, Catherine handed Peter the remaining documents about the Foxglove plant. This plan is kinda similar to the old Manhattan Project. Night Action wants to be one step ahead in making chemical weapons, while also developing the antidote so they stay in the lead. In past projects, the CIA and the military had already developed 9 chemical weapons. But right now, the mobile lab has been stolen. While Peter's still in shock, Noor arrives. This time, Noor is straight up tough. "You guys gotta get my family out first. If not, I'm not handing over the photos." Peter tells her it's not possible because evacuating people from a hostile country takes a lot of time. Catherine also puts pressure on her. She said that the information could reveal who stole the chemical weapons. Human lives matter most, but Noor doesn't care. She says, "I know you're in a rush, but I'm in an even bigger rush." End of episode 4, I've already transferred the photos onto the USB. Episode 5 takes us back 5 years. Catherine is visiting a detained Night Action soldier named Sammy. Sammy's been wrongly imprisoned for standing up for what's right. He's Arab, speaks a bunch of languages, and is ex-Delta Force, basically, the perfect spy. Back in the present, remember how Noor blackmailed Catherine at the end of the last episode? She's demanding that her mother and brother be brought back from their home country within days. Meanwhile, the embassy is investigating the incident. Right now, they only have a couple of pictures of Peter. And the security footage is missing 15 minutes. Javed and the ambassador suspect Peter had inside help, so a massive internal investigation kicks off. But when Javed sees Noor crying, he rushes to comfort her. Noor plays the "I'm not feeling well" card to keep him at arm's length, but still manages to turn on the charm. After Javed left, Hala started asking Noor what was up. She said Noor had been acting weird lately, but Noor wasn't opening up about it. On the other side of things, Rose wasn't doing much better. On one hand, her boss was trying to fire her. On the other hand, she was also pissed because Night Action wasn't planning on saving Noor's family. Peter was explaining how complicated things were, but Rose was like, "What if that was me?" Peter was convinced. He decided to reach out to Catherine to try to figure something out. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Solomon, the guy Rose stabbed earlier, was getting patched up by a doctor. His sister, Celeste, was right there roasting him. She was making fun of him, saying how could a big dude like The Rock get taken down by some tiny girl with a knife? She brought up settling down and getting married again. But Celeste subtly planted the idea in his head, and it finally got to Solomon. He started to waver. Watching this, I suddenly felt bad for Solomon. Maybe his sister raised him or something. Back at the safe house, Catherine brought Sammy in. He's going to carry out the plan to rescue Noor's family. Probably to keep things under wraps, Catherine didn't give this mission to anyone else. When Sammy heard he only had 24 hours to do it, he probably thought he was Jack Bauer or something. But when he realized how important the intel was and that he didn't want Noor's family to get left behind, he agreed and started planning the evacuation. Sammy's actually a pretty cool side character. He's good, but he's not a pushover. To make the plan work, Noor gave Sammy all the info she had on her family. At the same time, Rose met with her boss. She's worried about getting fired. But, totally the opposite of what she expected, her boss was actually super happy. Rose had added a new feature to the system. The investors were thrilled, and the agencies are so obsessed with our product, that they're going crazy for it. But Rose is worried that customers will abuse it. She used the fact that her boss couldn't do without her to snag the job of CTO, company stock, and even lock the company down with an ethics committee. I mean, talk about holding everyone else to a high standard, but cutting yourself some slack. At the safe house where they're communicating, Noor is talking to her mom, telling her to follow Sammy's plan. Back at the hideout, Peter and Rose shared what they'd gathered and then shared a sweet hug. But things at the embassy? Not sweet at all. Javed personally made a bowl of soup for Noor, then turned around and took Hala in for questioning. He started asking her about their logistics providers. Hala genuinely didn't know anything about the other stuff, so she got through that pretty easily. But when they asked about the guest list, plus the security cam footage, Hala tried to cover things up a bit at first. But she ended up cracking and saying it was Noor's phone. That's when Javed realized he'd screwed up. He looked at her for the first time, really looked at her. But after Noor left, he didn't immediately follow her or send anyone after her. He just sneaked into Noor's room to look for clues. Is this what happens when smart people don't fall in love? Getting the report, Adam and Solomon started analyzing things. They still can't figure out the organization that Peter works for. This is so weird. How did they figure it out in the first episode? Anna and Peter's exfil point? Or did they just follow them the whole way? They analyzed for a bit. Adam said he'd heard them mention night action on the comms channel. Looks like that could be the organization they work for. To keep investigating, Adam promoted Solomon and gave him a raise, 15%. Solomon got hyped up and said he'd go find Peter right away. Here's a little clue, Adam's team could eavesdrop on Peter through the comms channel during past operations, and maybe even later on. But they haven't been able to infiltrate night action. So there's only one possibility, they planted someone in night action's logistics supply chain. Next up is the biggest plot hole in the show, the operation to evacuate Noor's family to a new safe house. Honestly, if Javed had just sent someone to follow Noor, the whole group would have been caught by now. But nope. Meanwhile, back in Noor's home country, when some strangers show up at the house and tell him and his mom they need to evacuate immediately, he doesn't believe them at all. Even when his mom says Noor called to convince him, it doesn't work. Bottom line, getting the little brother into the car wasn't easy, and the neighbors noticed and called the police. Finally, when they were driving through a mountain road, they got stopped by the police. Even though Sammy took out the cops quickly, the little brother grabbed a cop's gun and threatened Sammy with it. But Sammy dodged the shot and returned fire, hitting him with a single, accurate shot. Guess this is just the irony of fate. Noor is always trying to look out for her family, but in the end, she only gets her brother killed. We jump ahead to episode 6, back at the safe house. Noor's been gone from the embassy for too long, and her phone rings. It's Hala on the other end. She tells her about the situation. Javed's doing an internal purge in the embassy, and she's in big trouble. In the other room, Peter is revealing the truth. Rose thinks they need to tell Noor that her brother's dead. But Peter and Catherine disagree. Noor walks in and senses something's off. She asks to speak to Rose in private, but Rose still doesn't tell her the truth. She just says Noor's brother was injured to cover things up. Noor doesn't press it further, but a new problem comes up. Javed's doing this purge in the embassy. Noor wants to go back and help Hala and her husband sort things out. Catherine finished checking the USB drive and started reviewing the intel. Turns out, it's a list of traitors who fled to Europe. Peter was stunned. She figures this list has gotta be connected to Project Foxglove somehow. In the color documents they have, there's a printer ID code. Even though investigating the mole needs to be kept secret, it's now tied to a potential chemical attack. Scene change, when Noor gets back to the embassy, Javed acts like nothing's wrong and calls her into his office to talk. He's slowly setting a trap for Noor. Peter goes back and tells Rose that the intel isn't related to Foxglove. Rose is disappointed. She argues with Peter a little. Right then, Catherine calls. Turns out, she found the female spy, Lauren, who leaked the DGSE documents. Using the video evidence she has, Catherine is forcing Lauren to work for her. They're planning to lure Solomon out tonight. Catherine decides to handle things herself, but they need someone to monitor things, to watch what's happening. That person can only be Rose. It has to be Rose, but since Peter and Rose are a little distant right now, Catherine's kind of stuck. Meanwhile, Tomasz contacted Marcus, saying he wants to personally be involved in the next operation. Marcus coldly agreed. The plan to lure out the fish officially began. Peter was in charge of outside support, and Rose was in charge of surveillance. Lauren brought Catherine to the meeting, and then pulled a gun and shot Lauren dead. Catherine was in danger. Peter used this as a distraction and ran back to save Catherine. At this point, Solomon didn't have a single one of his goons around, so they teamed up and captured Solomon alive. We move on to episode 7 right away. As usual, it opens with a flashback explaining why Solomon works for Adam. A year ago, Adam's Mercedes broke down. He had to stand by the road waiting for help. The kind-hearted Solomon stopped and helped. At the end of the last episode, Solomon is captured alive by Peter and Catherine. But even though he's been caught, Solomon isn't worried at all. On the contrary, He keeps bringing up Peter's dad to provoke him. Catherine cut him off, saying the interrogation expert was on their way. Peter got tense. He knows about night action and my father. He must know something. Catherine said, "Kid, you're still green. Anyone can see Solomon's trying to play you." Later, Peter mentioned that Solomon and his team had infiltrated their comms channel. Catherine and Peter pieced things together. Since Solomon has a mole in the CIA and a mole in the DGSE, it's very likely he also has a mole in the FBI, which is how he was able to get Night Action's comms codes. Night Action was originally built on an FBI foundation. I'm a little confused about this part, though. In the first episode, Anna revealed the extraction point over the comms channel. So Solomon and his team immediately went there. After that, Peter and Catherine started analyzing what the real goal of this intelligence selling group was. They're trying to figure out their motives. The biggest question is, who did they sell the information about the Foxglove project to? This is also the biggest mystery of Season 2. Right then, Noor frantically called and asked to meet. Peter immediately left, and Catherine stayed behind to interrogate Solomon. Before leaving, Noor accidentally ran into Javed. Javed still looks like a pathetic stalker, but Noor's on her way to meet Peter and his team. How can she let him follow her? So, after getting rid of her negative emotions, she was left alone. When they met, she immediately confronted Rose for lying to her. Rose was incredibly remorseful. Noor wanted to know if her mother was safe. She was extremely emotional. When Peter arrived, he also got grilled mercilessly by Noor. But arguing with Noor right now is the dumbest thing you could do. Peter could only tell her the truth, detailing her brother's death. Noor didn't believe it. She insisted on talking to her mother. But unfortunately, they couldn't get in touch with Sammy right now. Peter tried to persuade Noor not to go back to the embassy. Sammy's bringing her mother over tonight. Outside, Javed finally got smart. He took photos of Noor meeting Peter and Rose. Seriously, does this safe house only have one entrance and exit? If it gets surrounded, wouldn't they all get caught? Before the material stealing operation, Tomasz was feeling anxious. When he met up with the team, he acted all high and mighty with Marcus, saying his father requested that he lead the mission. Marcus politely gifted him a small handgun. During the operation, when the guards at the gate questioned them, Marcus started losing his patience and almost pulled his gun. But thankfully, Tomasz, with his intellectual look, successfully fooled the guards. Tomasz was super smug after doing something right for the first time. Meanwhile, Catherine's interrogation of Solomon wasn't making any progress. Out on the street, Rose and Peter started arguing again. Rose, coming from a civilian background, thought Noor was under too much pressure and they shouldn't lie to her. Peter didn't say anything. Peter got a call from Catherine and went back. After going back to Catherine's order, both Rose and Peter realized the gravity of the situation. A batch of cyanide had been stolen. This is one of the ingredients for the Foxglove plan. Plus, the mobile lab that was stolen earlier, the situation was getting way too dangerous. So, faced with this critical issue, Rose completely forgot all her personal feelings from before. She opened her laptop, got to work, found a professor connected to Project Foxglove, and offered to personally follow this lead. Peter started the interrogation, but this greenhorn got easily played by Solomon. Elsewhere, Rose, with intense determination, tracked down Professor Cole. She got straight to the point, mentioning Foxglove. At first, the professor tried to kick her out. But when he heard about the stolen cyanide, after convincing himself for a moment, he decided to take Rose back to his house. Scene change, at the professor's house, Rose carefully sends a message to Peter. Then she followed the professor down to the basement. On the surface, this project always remained theoretical. But later, he was kicked off the research team. Later on the news, he saw a warlord named Victor Bala use a chemical weapon on his own people. Then he was overthrown and eventually imprisoned at The Hague. So, Victor Bala will soon face trial, and he just happens to be Tomasz's father. So, the mystery of the story is finally starting to unravel. Now, Victor wants to use chemical weapons to get revenge on Night Action. He went to Adam to buy back information about Foxglove and started his revenge plan. While Rose and the professor were talking, there was a noise from the back door. Rose was immediately on alert, but it turned out it was just the professor's family coming home. As the two were discussing, Catherine called, reporting that the terrorists had acquired another ingredient. The professor said these ingredients could create a fifth-generation foaming nerve agent, and there's currently no antidote. Peter asked, what other ingredients do the terrorists need? The professor said it could be from a company somewhere. After looking it up, there was one in Long Island and one in Philadelphia, both not far away. Catherine and the FBI split up and go to Long Island and Philadelphia. So, the mission in Coil Solomon was just Peter now. On the other side, Noor, when facing Javed alone, wasn't so easy to fool anymore. Javed gradually closed in, using each photo to tear away Noor's disguise. But Noor immediately pretended to be an innocent little bunny, saying this man was always following her. He threatened her to hand over information. She was so scared. Then, she met him again at the party. She was really panicking, and then she broke down, crying with frustration. Javed coldly handed Noor a tissue. He said if she didn't tell the truth, she'd never see her mother again. Moreover, she'd now betrayed her homeland. Imagine what you'll face when I take you back home. Noor was forced to admit she sought protection from night action. But to save herself, Noor said she could still redeem herself. She could lure Peter out. Javed was delighted, but Noor, who fell into Javed's trap, didn't show up. Sammy brought Noor's mother to the rendezvous point on the street all night. The cunning old Solomon knew very well that what Peter cared about most now was the whereabouts of Foxglove. At first, Peter wasn't swayed. But after talking to Catherine and learning that more ingredients had been stolen, he started getting anxious. And then, the professor's family, along with Rose, got kidnapped. After capturing them, Marcus said he only needed the professor and his family. He planned to execute Rose because she had no value. Rose immediately said, "I'm the professor's postdoctoral research assistant. I have value." Tomasz saw this and persuaded Marcus to take her along. Peter, who was just heartbroken over true love, went crazy. He decided to take Solomon and leave behind an empty room. Catherine could only stand there with a confused look on her face. Stuff like this with Jack Bauer is really just for kids. Don't even talk about escorting a suspect. Asking him to bring someone intact, or just a part of someone wasn't a problem at all. In short, episode 7 ended with a somewhat illogical reaction. New York was about to face a chemical weapons crisis. We continue the story in episode 8. Poor Professor and Rose were locked in a warehouse by Marcus. Meanwhile, Peter unilaterally released Solomon. Now, Catherine has lost a subordinate and Solomon. And the FBI deputy director, Aiden, lost a lead. The two exchanged information. Aiden told Catherine to investigate Peter. Right now, Night Action's main focus is to find Peter. It feels like they're totally useless because they lost all the leads. Scene change, Rose and the professor were changing together, which is why I always emphasize that Rose is a very deep female lead. Next, through the professor's words, the show explained how terrifying this completely self-contained lab was. Aiden's idea was that if there was an accident during the production of chemical weapons, they'd just let others die as long as they lived. So the two began toiling away. The professor wanted to resist, but Marcus used the professor's family to threaten him, forcing him to agree. Rose comforted him, saying they could find a chance to escape. On the other side, Solomon took Peter to a riverbank. Interestingly, Solomon said, "We killed your colleagues. You killed our colleagues. Everyone is loyal to their side, it has nothing to do with personal hatred." Solomon's vision is really broad, he's gone beyond the confines of a simple nation-state. In some ways, low-level agents like Peter are really easily deceived by organizations and taken advantage of. It's just that, at the moment, Foxglove is really threatening public safety in New York. After meeting Adam, Adam began to show off in front of Peter, but let's skip these nonsense words. Adam said, "Foxglove is important to you. Rose is important to you. But to me, they're not important at all. If you give me what I want, I'll tell you the location of the terrorists. You'll save Rose." Peter didn't hesitate and asked what he wanted. Adam said, "The Secretary General of the United Nations has a file that I need. Give me that file, and I'll tell you Rose's location." Peter was still wondering what he needed a file like that for. Adam was all mysterious again, saying one person's honey is another person's poison, and vice versa. Really, this mission has no pressure at all. Compared to the things Jack Bauer has done, and disobeying orders, using illegal means to obtain a file from the Secretary General of the United Nations is really nothing. Now imagine Peter, a low-level night action agent who doesn't have many connections in New York. How can he complete this mission? Does everyone remember Noor? She's a member of the United Nations delegation. Look, help has arrived. Coincidentally, Noor just promised Javed that she could lure Peter out. Isn't that too coincidental? Peter was wondering why Noor hadn't reunited with Sammy yet. Noor said, "I don't trust you guys, but now I need to see you." Peter also needed to see her, so he agreed immediately. As soon as Peter met Noor, he said, "I know we messed up with you, but now I need your help to save Rose. I need to get into the United Nations. If you help me, I'll take you to see your mother tonight." Noor said, "You're lying. My mother is still alive." Peter was speechless, so he called Sammy right away. Great, the misunderstanding was cleared up. Noor was so embarrassed she just wanted to dig a hole and crawl in. She said, "I can help you make a UN access card, but the problem is, Javed is coming." Peter didn't blame Noor, he just handed her a taser and said, "Just do it." In the lab, the professor said he wouldn't do it, but his hands continued to synthesize the chemical weapon. Meanwhile, Rose observed the conflict between the Tamash brothers. One was a prince but had no power. The other was eager to replace him. How could they ever get along? "Right now, we can use the family to control the professor, but this girl is our weakness." Tamash said, "Try it, and you'll lose your life." So just when the professor and Rose were making a little progress, they were interrupted. The professor told Rose that if successful, the solution would turn purple. But Tamash took Rose away. As a result, this young master not only couldn't get any information but was also reverse engineered and psychologically manipulated by Rose. Peter's safe house only has one exit, blocking it is all you need to do, right? But he waited for them to come out and then attacked in the middle of the wide street. As a result, the forces were dispersed. In a 1-on-3 situation, Peter transformed into a god of death, using a baton to beat all 3 of Javed's people into a pulp. But when driving away, Peter was shot by Javed, leading to a roadside collision. In the end, he escaped Javed by running and relying on the subway. Scene change, Noor was able to safely return to the embassy and even used Javed's own computer to make a fake card for Peter. But right then, someone entered the room, opened Javed's safe, and took out the DGSE list. Noor, who was hiding at the moment, was discovered. It turned out to be the ambassador. He looked at Noor and realized she was the mole, and she saw right through the ambassador. Earlier, they mentioned his daughter's betrayal. The ambassador wanted to protect his daughter, and Noor took advantage of that. The ambassador was convinced by Noor. At that moment, Sammy was monitoring Noor and reported the news to Catherine. He only discovered that Noor still hadn't found Peter. Catherine told him to continue following Noor because they didn't have any other leads right now. Meanwhile, the naive Tamash went to ask the professor, "Can this chemical be controlled?" The professor explained how it could cause a tragedy, then handed a test tube containing the successful sample to Tamash and told him, "This little bottle is the successful product." Immediately, Tamash's conscience awoke. He told the professor to not succeed and, to stall for time. He would find a way to solve it. But in the end, the plan failed. Marcus lost patience and dragged out the professor's family. But while talking, the professor unintentionally revealed the secret agreement between him and Tamash. Plus, Marcus already wanted to kill Tamash. He finally found an opportunity. He locked Tamash in a room. The two continued to argue fiercely. Tamash said, "We have to expose Night Action's lies, we can't use this method." But Marcus didn't believe him. He locked the door and threw a tube of the chemical inside. In that sealed room, Tamash died a tragic death under the destructive power of the chemical. Episode 8 ended, and continuing the story in episode 9. The flashback in this episode is what happened at the end of season 1. After Peter and Rose handled the attack on the vice president, the two enjoyed a sweet moment before parting ways. The story returns to the present. In the dark lab, Rose and the professor manufactured bottle after bottle of the chemical. There were 15 complete bottles in total. The professor still hoped that after completing this batch, they would be released. Of course, that would never happen. He was forced to start producing the second batch. In his spare time, the professor told Rose that these 15 bottles of the chemical could cause a large-scale massacre. He felt incredibly guilty. He thought that the Foxglove plan was supposed to save people, but it turned out like this. At that moment, the terrorists discovered they were stalling and urged them to continue working. Rose suggested that maybe they should sabotage things and make a defective batch. The professor replied that it was worth a try. At that moment, Peter, with the goal of saving his love, was heading towards the United Nations building with Noor. Finally, we saw Peter change his clothes. Noor asked, "After you get in there, where are you planning to go?" Peter replied, "The Secretary General's office." Noor was shocked, "I only got you a visitor's pass. The authority isn't high enough." Peter said, "We'll figure it out as we go." Noor said, "Well, after you get inside, try to find the Secretary General's advisor, Lars." The two successfully entered the United Nations building and split up to act separately. Before parting, Peter again expressed his regret. Meanwhile, at the embassy, Javed, the biggest loser in the show, was about to face an even bigger tragedy. Javed was furious and started to say nasty things. He then turned to threaten him. Daring to threaten a high-ranking official under him, maybe he thought his faction was stronger, forcing the ambassador to bow his head. And Hala, who was eavesdropping outside, panicked and ran away. Meanwhile, at the United Nations building, Noor found a beautiful girl and gave her the DGSE list. The girl was stunned, How could she know such shocking news with a monthly salary of $2,800? At that moment, Hala called to inform her that Javed was coming. Hala was truly a reliable friend. In the elevator, Peter stole a higher-level access card from a UN employee and then, posing as an IT staff member, broke into Lars's office. He started searching for the file, but because he didn't help Lars fix the Wi-Fi, Peter was suspected. So he used force. Lars was forced to lead Peter to find the file. Outside the United Nations building, presidential candidate Governor Hagen was campaigning with voters. Sammy and Catherine also followed the lead there. Noor hid in the crowd but was discovered by Javed. Javed tried to scare them with his diplomatic immunity. Poor Javed was beaten badly yesterday, and today he was surrounded again. Unable to resist, he was punched repeatedly. Noor seized the opportunity to escape and accidentally met Sammy, finally reuniting with her mother. And Peter and Lars upstairs looked like a couple entering a restricted area. When passing a security checkpoint, Lars suddenly shouted, "Arrest him!" But Peter easily knocked down the guard. Lars was immediately terrified and finally had to lead Peter to the document. After obtaining the file, Peter left the building and was immediately spotted by Catherine, who was ambushing him. Peter hurriedly blended into the crowd, and Catherine was captured by Solomon. What a true tragedy! Solomon took Catherine to an empty parking lot and forced her into the trunk of a car. Catherine struggled to resist, and as a result, Solomon was stabbed to death by a fire hydrant on the wall. I'm speechless. I thought Solomon and Peter would finally have a dramatic death battle, but who knew he would die this way? In the lab, Marcus began urging the production of the second batch of chemicals. But Marcus wasn't as soft as Tomasz. He directly stabbed the professor's wife. Javed, who was just beaten to a pulp, was called back by the ambassador. Now, he had to bear the consequences for threatening the ambassador earlier. The situation changed in the blink of an eye. Javed became a prisoner and was escorted back to his country. But who knows, going back home might present an opportunity to turn the situation around. Perhaps that's the story of Season 3. And the woman he always remembered, Noor, was finally reunited with her mother. In the lab, the professor exploded in anger, but Rose stopped him, so he started mixing an anesthetic gas. Meanwhile, Marcus was reporting the progress to Victor over the phone and took the opportunity to report that Tomasz had betrayed them and been executed. In the face of his dream of hegemony, Victor, the ambitious one, only felt a little regret. Peter, who obtained the file in broad daylight, had to wait until night to find Adam. The two met on the Roosevelt Island tram. After getting the address, Peter immediately reported it to Catherine. In the lab, the anesthetic gas began to spread, and the guards fell on the spot. Another one wearing a gas mask came out to check but was knocked down by Rose. The professor pulled Rose along, grabbed 2 more gas masks, and rushed off to find his wife and daughter. On the way, they encountered 2 guards, and the group was separated. Rose protected the professor's wife but was captured by the guard. The professor was lucky enough to escape with his daughter. He immediately turned back to save his wife and Rose. The little girl ran outside and met Peter. Peter told her to call the police, took off her mask, and rushed inside. Outside, the FBI finally arrived. Catherine had also clearly understood the situation. Currently, Marcus and his accomplices have a total of 15 containers of the chemical, enough to wipe out all of Manhattan. Marcus had led his henchmen to sneak into the United Nations. The crisis had begun. Episode 9 ended. The story continued in Episode 10, which was also the final episode of the season. This episode would solve all the mysteries. The opening of this episode was a scene about Adam's past. 8 years ago, at a center's opening ceremony, Adam hid himself in the chaotic crowd. A handsome guy in stylish boots approached him. After a few pleasantries, he kept asking why he contributed the most, but the center wasn't named after him. Adam was blunt, "I like being discreet." "You're flattering the wrong person. Don't think I'm stupid, but we can still cooperate." The story then returned to the present. The FBI and CIA surrounded the United Nations building. As Marcus and his subordinates prepared, 2 security guards from the plant patrolled there and were quickly taken down by Marcus's men. The sound of gunfire echoed, alarming everyone. Marcus and his subordinates quickly changed clothes. And Marcus disguised himself as a United Nations security guard. He divided them into groups of 3 subordinates. Each group had 2 people, each with their own task. When a large number of CIA police poured into the building and began searching. On the way, one of his subordinates carrying a chemical container was shot down by the CIA. After reuniting with an injured subordinate, he continued to flee. On this side, Rose continued to use high technology to track down Marcus. But instead of finding Marcus, she discovered 2 clues related to Tomasz. One was a lawyer, and the other was Sloan, whom Tomasz had mentioned before. Sloane was someone who liked to show off on the internet. So, just from one photo, they found her address. At that moment, Sloane was still sleeping soundly in bed. She didn't know her boyfriend was in the morgue. She heard someone enter the room, but when she saw it was Marcus, she was immediately terrified. Marcus needed Sloane's access to arrange Tamash's private jet. And Sloane had been tied up. Then Peter knocked on the door, claiming to be with the FBI. Marcus told Sloane to open the door while he hid behind it, holding a gun, ready to fire. Sloane outwardly said if they wanted to come in, they needed a search warrant, otherwise, get out. But her hand was making a sign for help. In the hallway, Rose discovered a repairman talking about an air conditioning problem. She immediately followed him. The result, I'm sure everyone can guess, inside was a chemical container. At this moment, the system had reached 192 kW/H. There were 8 minutes left until it hit 200 kilowatts. In the room, Peter saw Marcus using Sloane as a hostage. Peter saw Rose and immediately understood. Rose fired a shot to distract. Sloane broke free. Peter was shot, and Marcus died. Luckily, Rose had received accelerated training from the professor. She immediately took out sulfuric acid and alcohol. 1 minute left. A series of tense but neat operations finally triggered the fire. The system shut down, the chemical container was neutralized, close call. Before leaving the building, Peter confessed to Rose. I'm going to turn myself in right now. I may go to jail, but I want you to promise me something. As long as I'm an agent, you'll always be taken advantage of. But you're more important than anything to me. So, don't come looking for me next time, okay? Rose didn't know what to say. This destined couple was once again separated. Walking out the door, Peter surrendered his weapon and was escorted away by Catherine. After Peter got into the car, the two silently looked at each other through the car window. The story of Season 2 also came to an end. The plotline about Victor had closed, but Adam's story was not yet finished. Does everyone remember the election I mentioned? Knox and Hagen, and the person Adam met was candidate Governor Hagen. It was Hagen who organized the event in front of the United Nations building in Episode 9. The person responsible for protecting Hagen was Agent Chelsea from Season 1. She only appeared for a few seconds in Season 2. What a pity. Finally, Hagen revealed his true colors. It turned out he was the guy in the leather shoes. In the flashback at the beginning of Episode 10, for the past 8 years, he and Adam had been cooperating, rising from a small-time politician to governor. Now he was even running for president. Adam handed over the file about Victor Bala. Hagen seemed a little presumptuous. But Adam reminded him, don't forget who your sugar daddy is. And Noor and her mother finally received US citizenship. So Peter was summoned back. Alright, that's the end of Season 2. The movie ends here. Goodbye, see you in the next movie.